and welcome to Education Talk. Now, this is one of your best programs on education on television. I'm Wilma, and you're very welcome. In this program, we look at the challenges faced by all stakeholders in education and procure solutions to these challenges. Today, we'll be discussing about the school appeal by a school in Vanuatu, the budget, what do we have for schools in the budget, and the eclipse. Did you take part watching the eclipse? Well, to discuss these various issues with me today is Dr. Chris Mafidon. He's a popular guest on this program, and he's an education consultant. Dr. Chris, you're very welcome to our studios.
Thank you, Wilma.
And I also have here with me Antoine Allen, who is a social scientist and a blogger. Antoine, you're very welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here today.
Now, let's start with Vanuatu. A school devastated by Cyclone Pam has appealed for replacement textbooks. Here is a report from one of our correspondents, Paul Chapman.
This is all that's left of the library at the main school in Vanuatu's capital after the devastation of Cyclone Pam. The Category 5 storm ripped the roof off the building. Staff are laying what books survived to dry in the sunshine. The head says he's determined to reopen next week, but his school and others are desperate for replacement books and equipment.
There are lots of book warehouses out there. You know, in the Western world, books are going out of fashion. You can't sell your second-hand books. You can't get rid of them. Well, we need good books, good encyclopedias, reference books, all subjects, reading books, from kindy right up to year 13 young adult books.
It's estimated almost half the country's population's been affected in some way by Cyclone Pam. Some 3,300 are known to be homeless. That number's certain to rise as the impact on outlying islands becomes clearer.
Can contact any of the aid agencies appealing for help for schools in Vanuatu to send educational materials to them. Dr. Chris, let's start with you. Talking about Vanuatu, how best can schools in other countries, especially schools in the West, help the schools in Vanuatu?
We've always had the twinning programs between schools in the developed world with those in the developing world, or the emerging economies. Just twinning schools together is one practical way where the head teacher of the school in the West communicates with the head teacher of the school in the developing economy, be able to know their needs, be able to know instantly their requirements, and then be able to assist them with our surpluses here or what we've used. I mean, almost every other year we have our computers, for instance, upgraded. What happens to the old computers? They are very functional, they still work, but it's not a new software. And there are countries where there's only one computer in the entire school. So why can't we just ship that? That should have been long running. It doesn't take it's not rocket science to be able to know that you're your neighbor's keeper. You look after your neighbor. And those doctors, those lawyers, those engineers that will be trained from such economies do come. There's migration of power. The discoveries that you have in such economies also have global impact. So it's beneficial on both sides for all schools to be trained.
Antoine, you're a blogger. What needs do you think it's most important and most crucial for the schools in Vanuatu? Do you think it should just be textbooks that we should be sending to them now?
I think we're in 2015, so in the developed world, where we are right now, social media is a big part of the way we each live our lives, and also it's a way we can use technology and further education. So if you go to any school, you go to university, I always say that knowledge, if it's not used, just becomes stagnant. So for you to help the developed world, you can use social media to do that. We can upload lectures to YouTube, and we've already been done already, but we can do more, so that if your textbook has been destroyed, the knowledge that's inside that textbook is more than just words on a piece of paper. You can speak that knowledge. So if people were to, or teachers or lecturers or doctorates were able to just simply take a textbook and turn it into a visual form, it's not going to be destroyed once it's on the internet. So if these developing countries, especially what's happened in Vanuatu, were able to just have a simple tablet that's powered by solar power, they'll be able to get knowledge from all over the globe, i.e. on the World Wide Web.
Yes, Dr. Chris, you've mentioned that before.
Yes.
Having everything on a tablet and sending it over to schools less privileged.
Absolutely, and once you have it electronic, you can share it with so much ease, with so much convenience that you don't have to replicate it again. You are just spreading the good practice you have. So I think that's one thing. And then the teachers ought to be trained. The teachers in development ought to be trained in the use of mobile technology to be able to access.
And then even in terms of I remember when I went to university, you'd have to get the first or the latest edition of books, and that costs you each time.
Yeah.
But just to update a video takes, what, 10 minutes? Or just to re-record something, it doesn't cost you £20 to go to the bookstore. It's a very simple and an effective way for you to really just spread knowledge in the developing world.
That's fine, that's absolutely.
What about teacher training? How best do you think we can help in training their teachers?
Again, using technology, Google Hangout does not cost anybody anything. Skype will not cost anybody anything. All you need is a network. And most people have mobile phones. And if you have a mobile phone, it's not really a mobile phone. It can also act as a hotspot. So you can use that. We can have online training, online teaching, online support, and just block 1 hour a week where teachers will be able to exchange views and then share information. So that's one practical way anybody can assist.
Do you think of any other practical way?
I think he's answered all the questions there are, because really technology, we use it for fun most of the time. A lot of us go onto YouTube, we watch videos, sport, but it needs to be used for education, because the world is both disconnected and connected. Over social media, we can connect everyone. So if you have limited resources, the internet is vastly full of resources, but it's for you to really, and for everyone, to use it to its full potential rather than just for play.
And really, everyone in Vanuatu has a mobile phone, almost everyone, so really they can actually take advantage of that and use that. And let's go over now in the UK. 3 million people in the UK and Northern Europe have glimpsed the best solar eclipse in years. In a solar eclipse, a swath of the Earth is plunged into darkness as the moon comes between us and the sun. Many parents have taken their children to view this eclipse, and this is the practical aspect of science. You can now see on your screens the time-lapse video of the solar eclipse on Faroe Islands. At exactly 9:41 GMT, the island was in complete darkness. It will not be seen in the UK for another 10 years, and people have been advised not to look directly at the sun, as this can cause damage. Dr. Chris, let's talk about the solar eclipse. This is science, practical science happening here at our doorsteps that our children can actually take part in.
Fantastic. Number two, it's also a celestial event. Although we have technology and we have science, we cannot control it's happening. So it's a beautiful opportunity to illustrate to all our geography students what the relationship is every single day. Again, it demonstrates to us in terms of the planet why different cities are different time zones, because specific things happen at specific times. I mean, it's a whole 2-day lecture I can give on this, on the real importance of an eclipse. And so going to school today was really a waste of time. This is the best education any parent, any guardian, any student can experience it. Because it's now lifted out of the pages of a textbook and completely dramatized before our own eyes, and we can say, wow, you mean it is possible for things to happen once in a while, and then you see the sequence of the celestial bodies now, and you see the alignment. There's so much anyone can glean from it. I think every single worker should be out today really literally reflecting on what happens on the planet and reflecting on what is really behind the planetary events, because it couldn't be planned. It can be planned by the best astrophysicists, it can be planned by the best astronomer. It's just taking place, and some people say taking place naturally. He also tells me that there is a divine being behind a lot of happenings on the planet.
Did you blog about it?
Yeah, I was able to tweet about it, because I was kind of recalling where I was the last time it happened. And I think there's certain things that happen through nature that unites the whole of the world, that everyone can engage in at the same time. Often we go through certain things where there'll be an event which is man-made, so everyone can remember where they were when 9/11 happened. Everyone of a certain age can remember when Kennedy was shot. But in terms of natural events, things like the solar eclipse is something that unites the whole of this humanity, where we can all sit and gaze, or try not to gaze, at the marvel of just the world, the universe, and the pleasure it can give us.
And that's really the practicals of science at our doorstep today.
That's interesting, because you were saying gaze and try not to gaze, because the biologists will say, okay, if you align your eye in such a way, or looking at an earlier blog, I wrote, if you align the eye in such a way that you are looking directly at the sun, the reason why they say you shouldn't look at the sun is that the most concentration of your cones, which is your most sensitive cells that pick up colors and pick up fine things that you see, is at the cones. So the most concentrated aspect of it is the macula. So if you align it with the sun, it hits the macula. And if it hits the macula, it's so photosensitive that some of the cells are irreparably damaged. So you see, the eclipse not only talks about geography, it also talks about biology, it talks about cytology, it talks about literally everything. That's why I'm saying that it's a long learning process for us. I wish the country could stand still for a while and reflect on lessons that can be learned from such events.
We'll talk about that later on, but let's go on to the reaction on the budget given by Chancellor George Osborne this week. And stakeholders in education say there has been nothing or no real investment made regarding schools. Dr. Chris, what do you think about the budget? No real investment in schools. If the Tories win the next election, do you think there will be more investment in education?
It's very difficult to speculate because every aspect of public service is being cut down or rolled back. And it's very shameful because we are saying the economy is going through tough times. Meanwhile, you need skills, you need innovation, you need science to be able to jumpstart the economy. So if we fail to invest in science, research and innovation, we're going to be in real serious trouble because there are other countries that are aggressively researching, aggressively pushing the boundaries of science and therefore exploiting the innovation that comes from that and increasing the wealth. So it's, the government should think twice and see that just managing the schools is not good enough. You've got to lead. You've got to enthuse them to lead. You've got to incentivize the leaders, and you've got to invest in it. If you don't invest in your education, you wallow in ignorance. So I'm happy that they said you can now take a loan up to £25,000. That's one thing I gleaned from the budget. If you're doing a PhD program, so the government will give you a loan. If you're doing a master's, you can get £10,000 towards a master's program. So those are tiny ticks that I'll put there. But more importantly, the school building project must be revived. We cannot be using Victorian schools now because they've gone past their sell-by dates if there were any products.
Let's talk about the loan, the £25,000 loan you just mentioned. Antoine, do you think that is the best option for those going for a PhD in any innovative course or research-based
If you're in education right now, so when I finished, my degree was £3,000 a year, so it comes to £9,000 for the whole study, minimum, if you do 3 years. But now it's £9,000 a year, so it adds up to £27,000 a year. So if you're a student who most likely protest in London, as we can all recall, the government is now saying to you, well, okay, we were your enemies before, but we can potentially give you £25,000 towards your postgraduate degree, so don't hate us too much. But when you're looking back, you're thinking, well, I'm still paying £18,000 more than my predecessors. So really, as a student, you're thinking, I can leave my studies or further studies with £50,000 plus to my name. And it gets to a point where you're thinking, really, if there's no jobs out there, if there's no prospects for my future, how can I afford to make this decision? I think really the government has put students in a very hard situation where they have to choose from education, careers, or just surviving in the world. Because you can be the most educated person in the world and still end up on the streets today. Because there's plenty of people who are losing their jobs, plenty of people who've worked their whole life in certain sectors that have been cut. So the budget is better than nothing. But as a former student, a very soon former student, I would say that students aren't particularly happy with this because we're still looking at that £9,000 you're paying each year, and that's the top end. So I would say, like, problems should be started from the bottom, like we were saying with primary school children. There's cuts that are affecting them as well, but they won't even realise. They won't realise that they can't think outside the box anymore because there's so many children crammed into their class. All of the innovation that teachers used to be able to do, they can't do anymore because they have to tick boxes, they have to make sure everyone does this and does that. And as a teacher, you can't even flourish, you can't even express yourself. So as a student, if your teacher can't express herself or himself, how can you expect to? So I think, looking back at my own education, it's a hard time for children right now. Because I volunteered in a primary school for a year, and I always think, whatever level you are in the class, you don't know what it's like to be anyone else. So I sat with a child who was very, very autistic. And the struggle he went through each day made me think that a teacher has to deal with his end of the spectrum, but also a very bright child in the same class. And how can you balance that? He's barely learning how to count to 2, yet there's other children in the class who are thirsty for more knowledge. And with more children in the class, it's hard for you to cater to both of those needs.
Dr. Chris, we've talked about that, the learning methods, the communication, and how to actually differentiate the students in a class. As he said, a child that is very autistic and a child that is learning at a very fast pace. Parents are the ones caught in between these two scenarios. What should parents do?
Quite honestly, you should have regular meetings with the teachers. You should have progress assessment made at the beginning of the term, halfway through the term, and at the end of the term. And then you should be able to, because at home you don't have a time restriction, unlike in school where you have 20 minutes or half an hour or 45 minutes for a particular body of knowledge to be assimilated with the students. The parents should be given the tools, they should be given the information to be able to better support their children at home. Because what the school is doing alone will not be able to get the best out of the child.
But just taking on from that point, just from the perspective of the school I was in, some of those parents' level of education was only slightly above their own children. So how can you teach someone when you need to be taught yourself?
Fantastic, because we have the PTA. That's how the PTA was set up, because the PTA had parents that are well educated, those ones that are mediumly educated, and those that just barely scrape by. Now, in the forum of parents, no parent is afraid to ask questions from the other parents what's happening. So if we have classes for parents to help them, A, understand changes in the curriculum, B, let them know what the government policy is, C, what is it that my child is supposed to know at this age and at this level, then you find out that the community will be well informed and be able to work through. So parents can do a lot if they are given the tools, and that tool will also include training. Why do we have insert for teachers that are already professionals every single term, yet we don't have any form of training for parents? If we are able to rebalance that, you find that parents will come on board and the so-called achievement gap will be completely closed up. So I'm just hoping that the government is able to come up with a real policy that clearly identifies this need and addresses it, because the Parent-Teacher Association has failed. It's now become a political event where you raise funds. Raising funds is great, but educating is better.
Education is better. Now let's listen to some reactions from some stakeholders in education, such as the TUC Secretary General.
We know that we're still facing extreme cuts if the government is re-elected. No word on the NHS and whether the NHS's budget would be protected. Nothing on real investment needed in schools, in our infrastructure, transport and energy. In fact, we've seen a huge 15 billion cut in investment in infrastructure under this government.
We would have liked to see more detail of how the government will actually rein in spending over the next Parliament. The Taxpayers Alliance last week produced our own spending plans saying exactly what we think needs to be done in order to reduce spending over the next 5 years. But I'm afraid there's been precious little detail from any of the parties as to how they will do it.
Dr. Chris, what do you think the TUC should do to ensure that the government hears their pleas?
Because it's their primary responsibility as teachers to deliver on behalf of these innocent students, they should literally go on a war path with the government until the government hears them. Because they've done that before. They did that for pensions, they did that for conditions, because they wanted to attract the best brain into teaching and therefore wanted to improve the conditions of the teachers. So now they should engage with the government, go on any means, because if you don't invest in these children now, don't blame them if criminality runs wild. If we look after our young ones and we train them and we develop their God-given talent and skills, there is no way they cannot be responsible members of the society. The police department will literally shut down if there's no criminality. So and we can attempt that now and say, look, if we'll invest enough in these children, we are going to have not just contributors to the taxation system, of course they will do that, but we have more engineers, we'll be able to export skills to other parts of the world. Why can't we do that? Why should we live in this skill deficit country when we have all the resources? We have leading universities that turn up Nobel laureate as if it's something normal. So why can't we tap into that? Because we are so well resourced. We can't have an island of intellectual elite and then we have a huge sea of those that are not educated just because we cannot invest or see the need for it. So the TUC and all the teaching unions should really form an alliance and make their position loud, very loud and clear, so that everybody understands where they stand.
Antoine, looking at the current generation and the level of education and the investment of the government into education, in the next 20 years, what do you think would happen to our youths?
I think youth, students, and my generation, the generation before me, are kind of at a crossroad, because the baby boomers of the 80s, their salaries are getting lower, the opportunities for growth as a person are getting less. So if you were at school and you could explore different avenues, you could try this subject and find out, oh, I don't really like that, try something else and find out you do love this. And you can explore yourself and find yourself as a person. I think that's what education is supposed to do. You go to university to get a degree, but in those 3 years, you actually find yourself. But now, because you want to secure a job, but because it's so hard to secure a job, you're not doing that exploration. So you've got people who've worked their whole life, they've done the studying, they've done the revision, they've passed the tests, and now they just want to be a banker just so they can make money to survive. But in terms of life experiences, in terms of you growing as a person, you're not able to do that anymore. So you're getting people who get to their 30s, who get to their 40s, who look back in their life and think, okay, I've got the house, I've got the car, I've got money in my bank, but I don't really like my life anymore. So you as a person, you haven't grown. Your mind and your knowledge is more, but as a soul, as a being, you're less. So I think it's hard for people or children or students to decide what they want to do with their life, because like there's been studies showing that back in the day, because I'm young, you could be in one job your whole life, but now you're most likely going to go from job to job, and that job may be something completely different to what you were in before. So you need transferable life skills, transferable work skills. But a lot of people, a lot of students aren't learning these anymore. You're just ticking boxes. You can do your maths, you can read and write, you know a little bit of science, but apart from that, you can't really function in the world. So
what do you really think is missing, Dr. Chris? I know the topography of things are changing, but what do you think is missing?
Looking into the future, the UK Commission for Skills and Employment, that's a government commission for skills, has written and published that 1 in 7 jobs in 2022 will require a postgraduate qualification. So if we look towards the future, and it talks about the dynamics of what is going to happen to the different industries. If we think we're serious about the future, we plan for the future. We don't plan with the past in mind. So we have to be very serious with what we're doing to the children. If any child is not trained in a particular skill, they're not given what it means to be able to develop themselves to the full potential, you know what happens? Somebody else will occupy them. Somebody will engage them. And that's what every government should have in mind. If you really are really serious, get the Home Office Secretary and get the Education Secretary to sit down together and work out how we can not only prevent crime, but how we can generate more income. And if we undermine employment or skills, we are in for a longer trouble than we can ever imagine.
Just before we go now, we're running out of time, but I want to ask you about you speaking next to the best neuroscientist, and also Anne-Marie was in Spain to talk about STEM.
Yes, because there's a new publication out showing the highest paid professionals right now are engineers. Yeah. Most people don't know that. They still think that, oh, I can do whatever I need to do. So you need to align yourself with that. And regarding our speaking, if you're watching this program, if you can email us today, you get a free ticket to attend the event. If you don't, they will charge you at the gate. So make sure that you email us and you get a free ticket. And the seminar is worth at least £250. So you cannot afford to miss on it, because it will tell you why is it that people fail exams, why do people top the class, what are the real secrets in terms of you topping the class effortlessly, consistently in every single subject, because we're looking at it from the neuroscientific perspective, which is not available in the classroom. So we're trying to disseminate that. So you cannot afford to miss it. If you're a learner of any type, at any level, if you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're involved in anything that has to do with technology, then you must email us. And it's free to you if you email. Don't turn up, if you turn up without emailing us, then you'll
have to pay at the door. Thank you so much, Dr. Chris. Thank you so much for coming in. We are running out of time now. Thank you so much, Antoine.
Thank you.
And I look forward to seeing you both again. And viewers, this is Education Talk. For more information, you can send emails to educationtalk@lovewatv.co.uk. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of our programs.